Welcome to the Haunted Tales, where we uncover the chilling stories that lurk in the shadows of the Golden State. California is known for its sun-soaked beaches, glamorous Hollywood lights, and breathtaking landscapes, but beneath the surface lies a dark history filled with haunted places that defy explanation. Tonight, we take you on a terrifying journey through some of the most haunted locations in California, where spirits roam, ghostly whispers fill the air, and the past refuses to rest. If you think you can handle the horror, turn down the lights, sit back, and prepare yourself for a tale of the supernatural like no other. But beware, these stories are not for the faint of heart. Are you ready to explore the darkest corners of California? Then let's begin. The Queen Mary's Curse. Ghosts of the Eternal Voyage. The Queen Mary, a legendary ocean liner turned floating hotel, loomed over the Long Beach harbor like a slumbering beast. Once the pinnacle of luxury and wartime service, now it was a relic of the past, whispering stories of lost souls and spectral hauntings to those who dared listen. For years, the ship had been a magnet for paranormal investigators, thrill-seekers, and skeptics alike. But no one truly knew the extent of the darkness that lingered within its steel hull, until now. The Invitation. Nathan Grayson was an aspiring horror documentarian, always on the hunt for the next great ghost story. When he received an invitation to conduct an exclusive overnight investigation aboard the Queen Mary, he thought he had struck gold. The email had been cryptic, sent from an unknown address. Come alone. Your cameras won't save you. The ship has waited long enough. Nathan assumed it was a publicity stunt. Perhaps the management had set up a stage-haunted experience for content creators. But he couldn't resist. With his equipment packed and his mind buzzing with excitement, Nathan checked into the Queen Mary late at night, greeted by the lingering scent of salt and the dim flickering of the ship's antique chandeliers. The phantom whispers. Nathan wandered through the vast, dimly lit hallways, capturing B-roll footage. The ship groaned as though alive, the distant hum of unseen machinery vibrating beneath his feet. As he passed the infamous first-class swimming pool, long abandoned, he heard a splash. Nathan whipped his camera around. The pool was empty. Then, the giggle of a child echoed through the tiled chamber. "Who's there?" he called, his voice swallowed by the still AIR.no response. Just as he turned to leave, he saw wet footprints appear on the tile, leading towards him. His breath hitched. The legend of Jackie, the drowned girl, had been documented countless times, but this was different. The temperature plummeted. A shadow loomed over him, and a whisper grazed his ear. Turn back. The engine room's secret. Nathan ignored the warning and ventured deeper. His destination, the engine room, where the infamous Door 13 had crushed a crewman to death. His camera light flickered as he approached. The air smelled of burnt oil and decay. The door creaked open by itself. Nathan peered inside, his pulse hammering. A figure stood at the end of the corridor, drenched in oil and blood, uniform torn. The crewman's eyes locked onto Nathan's. Then, in a blink, he charged. Nathan stumbled back, slamming the door shut just as something heavy crashed against it. His hands trembled as he replayed the footage. The corridor had been empty, but the sound of footsteps pacing beyond the door sent a clear message. He was not alone. Room B340. Determined to uncover more, Nathan set his sights on room B340, the most haunted cabin on the ship. Reports of poltergeist activity, violent visions, and ghostly attacks were abundant. As he entered, his camera went dead. The lights flickered. The door slammed shut behind him. The walls began to scratch themselves. Get out! Get out! Get out! Nathan's breath came in ragged gasps. He reached for the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Then, a deep guttural laugh erupted from the corner. A man sat on the bed, his face twisted into a grotesque grin. Nathan blinked. The man was gone, but the laughter continued. The final message. Realizing he was in over his head, Nathan decided to leave. But as he rushed toward the gangway, the ship shifted. The world tilted, and suddenly, he was no longer in 2025. He stood on the deck, surrounded by soldiers in World War II uniforms. The ship was moving. The ocean stretched endlessly in all directions. He turned to a nearby officer. "What's happening?" The man looked at him with vacant, dead eyes. "We never left," Nathan screamed. Then everything went dark. The whispering walls of Winchester. The moment Claire stepped through the towering gates of the Winchester Mystery House, a chill licked at her spine. The mansion loomed before her, a sprawling labyrinth of twisting hallways, staircases that led nowhere, and doors that opened into voids. It was a house built on madness, a monument to grief, constructed under the relentless whisper of unseen spirits. "Are you sure about this?" David, her cameraman, asked, adjusting the lens of his camera. "I mean, this place gives me the creeps, and we haven't even gone inside yet." "That's the point," Claire replied with a grin, though she couldn't shake the weight pressing against her chest. "Our audience loves the haunted, the eerie. And this is the crown jewel of ghost stories." She was a paranormal investigator, well versed in the lore of haunted places. But the Winchester house was different. It wasn't just haunted, it was alive. With a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy front door, and the group, Claire, David, and their sound tech, Maddie, stepped into the dimly lit foyer. The air was thick with dust and something else, something older. The tour guide, an elderly woman named Evelyn, regarded them with knowing eyes. "You're in for quite a night," she murmured. "They don't like cameras." Claire smirked. "Who, the ghosts?" Evelyn's expression remained neutral. "The ones still wandering. They don't like being seen." The floorboards groaned beneath their weight as they moved deeper into the house. Claire traced her fingers over the ornate wallpaper, feeling a static buzz beneath her touch. It was as if the walls themselves were whispering, shifting, breathing. They set up in the grand ballroom, where the legend claimed Sarah Winchester once held seances, consulting spirits for architectural guidance. Claire turned on the EVP recorder. "If there are any spirits here, let yourselves be known." Silence. Then a low creak. A whisper that seemed to slither between the walls. David's camera flickered. "Damn it," he muttered. "Batteries draining fast." Claire caught movement in her peripheral vision, a shadow darting past the doorway. Her breath hitched. "Did you see that?" Maddie clutched her microphone. "Something moved in the hallway." Ignoring the pounding in her chest, Claire followed the shadow into the hall. The house seemed to shift around her. What had been a clear passage was now a dead end. She turned, pulse quickening. The others were gone. A door to her left creaked open, slowly, deliberately. Claire hesitated. The darkness beyond the threshold felt wrong. It wasn't just dark. It was hungry. A whisper caressed her ear. Sarah never finished. She whipped around. The hallway stretched longer than before, twisting like a living thing. Panic clawed at her throat. David? Maddie? A woman's voice, soft yet broken, sighed through the corridor. They are still building. Claire turned back to the open doorway and froze. A figure stood just beyond the threshold, draped in black mourning attire. Her face was hidden beneath a heavy veil, but Claire could feel her gaze, deep, sorrowful, endless. Sarah Winchester? Claire breathed. The figure tilted her head. It never stops. A violent shudder ran through the house. Doors slammed in unison. The chandelier above rattled. The walls groaned. Then the floor beneath Claire gave way. She fell, landing hard in a room she hadn't seen before. Dust swirled in the dim light. She gasped, pushing herself up, only to find the walls were covered in handprints. Some were smeared, as if people had clawed at them, desperate to escape. A single door stood ahead. But when she reached for the handle, the doorknob twisted on its own. Claire's breath hitched. The door burst open, revealing a staircase leading into a void of darkness. From below, something moved. A cacophony of whispers erupted. She built for us. We are still here. Join us. Claire stumbled back. She turned to run, only to find the veiled woman blocking her path. Sarah Winchester reached up with trembling hands and lifted her veil. Claire screamed. The face staring back at her was her own. The darkness behind the door yawned wider, tendrils of shadow reaching for her. The last thing Claire heard was the sound of hammers, still building, and then the house swallowed her whole. Whispers of Alcatraz. The wind howled through the crumbling remains of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, carrying with it the echoes of the past, of prisoners who had rotted away in their cells, of guards who had vanished without a trace, and of whispers that never seemed to fade. Ben Carter gripped the strap of his camera bag as he stepped off the ferry. His breath fogged in the damp, salty air, and the gray waves crashed violently against the rocky shore. He had always been fascinated by haunted locations, and Alcatraz, with its long history of suffering and despair, was the perfect subject for his latest documentary. The last tour group of the day filed past him, huddled together, as the final ferry of the evening departed. The tour guide, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes, gave him a skeptical glance. "You sure you want to stay here overnight?" she asked. "Not many people do." Ben smirked. "That's the plan. If I capture something real, it'll be worth it." The guide hesitated before nodding toward the cell block entrance. "Just be careful around D block. Solitary's got a history." Ben had done his research. D block was infamous for housing the most dangerous inmates. It was also where a prisoner, decades ago, had screamed about something in his cell before he was found dead by morning, his face frozen in terror, his body covered in claw-like scratches. That was exactly what Ben wanted to capture. The isolation of D block inside. The air was thick with the stench of mildew and rust. The walls were lined with rusted iron bars, and the empty cells stood like open mouths, waiting to swallow him whole. He set up his camera in D block, adjusting the infrared settings to capture anything lurking in the shadows. His voice echoed through the desolate space as he spoke into his microphone. "This is Alcatraz. A place where men were sent to disappear. Some say the island is cursed. That the spirits of the inmates never left." A cold draft slithered through the hall, sending a chill up his spine. He turned to cell 14D, the infamous solitary confinement cell. It was a pitch-black hole of suffering, where inmates were locked away with no light, no sound, just darkness. Ben stepped inside. The temperature dropped instantly. His breath hitched as he reached for his recorder. Then the door slammed shut. Trapped in the dark, panic clawed at Ben's chest. His flashlight flickered as he fumbled for the handle, twisting it desperately. It wouldn't budge. A deep, guttural whisper filled the cell. "Get out!" Ben's heart pounded. He swung his flashlight wildly, but there was nothing there. Just shadows. Then something breathed on his neck. He yelped, stumbling back. The air turned rancid, like decaying flesh. His camera, still running, caught the faint outline of something standing in the corner. It was barely visible, but its glowing eyes pierced through the darkness. Ben gasped. Then, the whispering grew louder. More voices. More things. He slammed his fist against the door. "Let me out!" The voices laughed. Then, just as suddenly as it had shut, the door creaked open. Ben staggered out, gasping for breath, his skin ice cold. He bolted from D block, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. The final encounter. Ben didn't stop running until he reached the main hall. He leaned against the wall, his body shaking. Then, he heard it. A single cell door creaked open. He turned, his camera trembling in his grip. The row of cells stretched before him, empty and silent. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. A figure emerged from the darkness. It was a man in an old prison uniform. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, his mouth twisted into a sinister grin. "You shouldn't be here," the man rasped. Ben froze. He tried to lift his camera, but his body wouldn't obey. The prisoner took another step forward, then another. Ben finally found his voice. Who are you?" The prisoner's smile widened. "Still here," he whispered. Then, in the blink of an eye, he vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. Ben ran, escaped from Alcatraz. By the time the morning ferry arrived, Ben was already waiting at the dock, his face pale, his hands trembling. He left without a word. When he finally reviewed his footage, the camera had captured it all. The slamming cell door, the whispers, the breath on his neck, and in the final seconds, just before he ran, the prisoner's face was there, smiling, watching, waiting. Alcatraz had never let go of its dead, and it never would. Whispers at the Hollywood Roosevelt. The night Olivia checked into the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, the neon lights of Hollywood Boulevard flickered outside, casting eerie glows on the lobby's golden chandeliers. The historic hotel, a relic of old Hollywood glamour, had always fascinated her. Legends of spirits, Marilyn Monroe's reflection in a mirror, Montgomery Clift's ghost pacing the hallways, only added to its mystique. She had chosen room 928, high above the city, where the echoes of past guests still lingered. It wasn't the infamous, haunted rooms that ghost hunters obsessed over, but something about it felt wrong. The bellhop, a wiry man with sharp features, hesitated before unlocking the door. "Let me know if you need anything, Mississippi." His voice wavered. He dropped the key in her palm and left quickly, as if he couldn't get away fast enough. Olivia's first instinct was to brush it off. She was here to soak in the hotel's history, maybe snap a few pictures for her blog. But the moment she stepped inside, an uneasy chill crept through the air. The walls bore an oppressive silence, as if the room itself had forgotten how to breathe. She tossed her suitcase onto the bed and pulled out her camera, snapping a quick photo of the vanity. When she checked the screen, her stomach twisted. A shadow stood behind her in the reflection. Olivia spun around. Nothing. Just her own pale face staring back. It's in your head. Just an old hotel. Shaking off the nerves, she decided to explore. The dimly lit hallways whispered with the echoes of past conversations, the soft hum of forgotten jazz music. A chill ran down her spine as she turned a corner and stopped at the grand ballroom. The chandeliers swayed slightly, though there was no draft. The air smelled of old perfume, heady, floral, unmistakably vintage. She raised her phone to take a video. As the lens focused, a figure appeared near the empty stage, a woman in a shimmering silver gown, her blonde curls cascading over her shoulders. Marilyn Monroe. The ghostly figure twirled as if lost in a private dance, her face blurred and expressionless. Olivia gasped, dropping her phone. When she looked up again, the ballroom was empty. The silence was deafening. Heart pounding, she retrieved her phone and sprinted back to her room. But as she reached for her key, she noticed something strange. Her door was ajar. She was sure she had locked it. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cigars. The old Hollywood kind. Olivia's hands trembled as she stepped inside. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. A whisper. Faint. You don't belong here. Her breath hitched. The closet door creaked open on its own. A man stood there. Dressed in a 1950s-style suit, his slicked back hair and piercing gaze locked onto her. He wasn't solid. His figure wavered, like a distorted film reel. Montgomery Clift. Olivia backed away, but her body refused to move fast enough. The ghostly figure took a step forward, his face unreadable, but his presence overwhelming. Then he vanished, a cold gust rushing past her. The vanity mirror shattered. A scream built in Olivia's throat, but her voice failed her. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She yanked it out. The screen was glitching, the camera app flickering open on its own. A new photo appeared. It was her, lying on the bed. Eyes wide open. Mouth frozen in a silent scream. But she hadn't taken that picture. Her hands went numb. The whispers grew louder. The walls seemed to close in. Get out! Olivia grabbed her bag and bolted. She didn't stop until she reached the lobby, breathless, trembling. The bellhop from earlier looked at her knowingly. Did you see them? He asked quietly. She could only nod. He sighed. They don't like it when someone new stays too long. She didn't ask who they were. She didn't need to. By sunrise, Olivia had checked out, never looking back. But when she reviewed the photos later, her heart nearly stopped. In the final image, her, screaming in bed, there was someone else in the frame. A shadowy figure, standing over her. The Whaley House. A haunted legacy. The Whaley House, nestled in Old Town San Diego, is not just a house. It is a living piece of history, one that holds an unsettling reputation as one of the most haunted locations in America. For those brave enough to enter its old wooden doors, there is an eerie feeling that lingers in the air, as though the spirits of the past never truly left. The house has witnessed centuries of tragedy, and with every creak of the floorboards or whisper in the wind, it reminds visitors of the dark past that continues to haunt its rooms. The story begins in 1857, when Thomas Whaley, a successful businessman, decided to build his dream home. He had a vision of grandeur, and he spared no expense. The Whaley house was constructed using brick, stone, and timber, and was designed to be the finest house in the area. It was a grand two-story structure with a large garden, but what made it truly unique was its location, a place steeped in history and tragedy. Before the house was built, the land had been the site of San Diego's first public gallows. In the early 1850s, a man named James, Yankee Jim, Robinson was hanged there for theft. Though he was only 24 years old, Yankee Jim's life and violent death would cast a long shadow over the property for generations to come. Thomas Whaley, oblivious to the gruesome history of the land, had the house built upon it. And from the moment the family moved in, strange things began to happen. The Whaley family, which included Thomas, his wife Anna, and their children, moved into the house in 1857. Initially, it seemed like a dream come true. However, it didn't take long before unsettling occurrences began to shake the foundation of their perfect life. The house, though beautiful, felt different. Cold drafts would swirl through the rooms even when windows were closed, lights would flicker on and off, and objects seemed to move on their own. At night, whispers and soft footsteps echoed through the hallways, though no one was there. The most troubling of all, however, was the presence of Yankee Jim's ghost. Legend has it that shortly after the Whaleys moved in, people began to report strange, shadowy figures appearing in the window where the gallows had once stood. The house, built upon the very spot where a man had been hanged, seemed to awaken something dark from its past. It was as though Yankee Jim's restless spirit had never truly left, and he was now sharing his grief with the Whaley family. In addition to the spirit of Yankee Jim, other tragic events would soon unfold that would add to the house's sinister reputation. In 1868, tragedy struck the Whaley family when their infant son, Thomas Jr., passed away suddenly. Devastated, Anna Whaley would later claim to have felt the presence of her son's spirit in the house. Other members of the family also reported strange encounters, including the feeling of being watched and sudden drops in temperature. As the years went on, the house continued to be a place of sorrow. The Whaleys lost more children, and even their daughter, Violet, would eventually take her own life in the home. Violet's untimely death would go down in history as one of the most tragic events to occur in the Whaley house. Violet was found in the house one fateful day, having succumbed to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Her death added another layer to the house's already heavy and haunted history. As time passed, the Whaley family eventually left the house, unable to escape the lingering presence of the spirits within its walls. The house changed hands a few times, and it was eventually turned into a museum to preserve the legacy of the Whaley family and its dark past. However, even as a museum, the hauntings didn't stop. Visitors who step into the Whaley house today often report feeling a chilling sense of unease as they walk through the rooms. The most common experiences include sightings of ghostly figures, the sounds of children laughing or crying, and the feeling of being touched or followed. One of the most notorious ghosts is that of Yankee Jim, who is said to haunt the second floor, where his ghostly figure is often seen pacing, perhaps still restless from his unjust hanging. Other ghostly presences are also felt throughout the house. Guests have claimed to see the apparitions of the Whaley family members, including Anna and Violet. Some visitors even say they've heard the sound of a baby crying, a reminder of the young life lost too soon in the house. But perhaps the most unsettling experience reported is the feeling of being watched. Many claim that someone is always watching, even when no one is there. The Whaley House is not just a museum or an old building. It is a place where the past comes alive in the most unnerving of ways. The house tells a story of love, loss, and tragedy, but also of restless spirits who refuse to leave. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, there is no denying the strange energy that surrounds the Whaley House. For those who dare to venture in, it offers an unforgettable experience, a chance to connect with the spirits of the past and witness firsthand the haunting legacy of the Whaley family and the land on which their house was built. The Whaley House stands today as a reminder of the past, a place where history and the supernatural collide. It serves as a chilling memorial to the lives lost and the spirits that continue to linger in the dark corners of San Diego's oldest and most haunted home. As long as the Whaley House stands, so too will the ghosts of the past, waiting for the next visitor to cross their threshold and feel the cold touch of history's darkest secrets. Bodie, the ghost town that lives on Bodie, a once thriving mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California, now stands as a haunting relic of the past, a ghost town frozen in time. Despite its decay, there is something about Bodie that refuses to fade. Legends and eerie stories swirl around its dusty streets and dilapidated buildings. The ghosts of its past linger, reminding the living of the dreams and tragedies that once unfolded in this isolated corner of the world. The rise of Bodie in the late 1800s. Bodie was a beacon of opportunity in the midst of California's gold rush era. Discovered in 1859, gold was first unearthed in the hills surrounding the town, sparking a frenzied rush of miners seeking their fortunes. The town grew quickly as prospectors and entrepreneurs flooded the area, hoping to strike it rich. Within a decade, Bodie had transformed from a small mining camp into a bustling, rough-and-tumble town. At its peak in the 1880s, Bodie boasted over 10,000 residents, making it one of the largest settlements in the region. The town had everything a booming community needed: saloons, brothels, general stores, a post office, a schoolhouse, and even a jail. But it was not just the wealth from gold that made Bodie notable. It was also its violent and lawless nature. It was a town where people lived and died by the whims of chance and fortune. Murders were not uncommon, and disputes often ended with someone being shot in the street. Bodie was a place where people came to escape their pasts, to start anew or to make their fortunes, but many never left, their stories forever intertwined with the town's history. The fall of Bodie. By the early 1900s, the gold reserves in Bodie began to dwindle, and the town's fortune began to fade. The once bustling streets grew silent as businesses closed and miners packed up and left. Those who remained faced the harsh conditions of a remote town that had little to offer beyond the mining industry. With the decline of gold production, Bodie's residents slowly dwindled, and by the 1940s, the town had become virtually deserted. Nature quickly reclaimed the land, and buildings that had once been full of life now stood empty and abandoned. The few who remained began to move away, and by the 1960s, Bodie was officially designated as a state historic park. Although the town was no longer inhabited, its story was far from over. The ghosts of Bodie today. Bodie stands as one of the best preserved ghost towns in the United States, attracting visitors from all over the world. The buildings, though weathered and decayed, still hold the echoes of a past that seems to linger in the air. The streets are eerily quiet, the wind whispering through the cracks of broken windows and abandoned storefronts. It is a place where time seems to have stood still, and the ghosts of its former inhabitants are said to walk among the ruins. One of the most famous tales of Bodie's hauntings is that of a woman who once lived in the town's hotel. According to local legend, she was the wife of a wealthy miner who struck it rich. They lived a lavish life in the hotel, but their happiness was short-lived. The miner's wealth was stolen by a group of bandits, and in a fit of despair, the wife threw herself from the hotel's balcony, plunging to her death. Her ghost is said to haunt the hotel to this day, and many visitors have reported seeing her apparition standing near the window, gazing out at the desolate landscape. Others claim to hear her footsteps echoing through the empty halls, and some have even felt an icy chill in the air, as if she were standing right behind them. Another haunting is tied to the town's saloon. In the late 1800s, Bodie was infamous for its rowdy saloons and brothels. One particular saloon was known for its nightly brawls, and it was said to be a place where men would come to gamble, drink, and fight. One night, a dispute between two miners escalated, and one of them was fatally stabbed in the altercation. The spirit of the murdered miner is said to linger in the saloon, and visitors have reported strange occurrences while exploring the building. Some have heard the sounds of glasses clinking and loud voices echoing through the halls, despite the building being completely empty. Others have reported feeling as though they were being watched, and some even claim to have seen the shadowy figure of a man lurking in the corner of the room. But not all of the ghosts in Bodie are tied to tragic events. One of the most peculiar hauntings involves the town's cemetery. The cemetery is the final resting place of many of Bodie's former residents, and it is said to be home to restless spirits who cannot find peace. Some visitors have reported hearing soft whispers in the air or feeling a strange presence watching them as they walk through the cemetery. One story tells of a man who visited the cemetery in the dead of night. As he stood near one of the gravestones, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. When he turned around, he found himself face to face with a figure dressed in old-fashioned clothing. The figure was silent, and after a few moments, it vanished into the darkness, leaving the man shaken and confused. The preservation of Bodie. Despite its haunting atmosphere, Bodie remains one of the most well-preserved ghost towns in the country. The state of California has worked hard to maintain the site, ensuring that its buildings remain intact and its history is not forgotten. Unlike many other ghost towns that have been overtaken by nature, Bodie has been preserved as a living history museum. Visitors can walk down its dusty streets, peer into the windows of abandoned buildings, and even enter some of the structures that have been preserved for educational purposes. But what makes Bodie truly unique is the sense of life that still seems to hang in the air. Despite its empty streets and broken windows, there is a feeling that the town is not entirely gone. Its ghosts live on in the stories, in the buildings, and in the memories of those who once called it home. The ghost town's preservation is not just about maintaining buildings. It's about keeping the stories of the people who lived there alive. It's about remembering the triumphs, the tragedies, and the lives that were lived in Bodie, a place where dreams were made, and dreams were shattered. The legacy of Bodie today. Bodie continues to draw people from all corners of the world. Some come to experience the thrill of walking through a real-life ghost town. Others come in search of the paranormal, hoping to catch a glimpse of a ghost or hear a whispered voice. But no matter the reason, all who visit Bodie leave with a sense of awe, as though they have witnessed something extraordinary. Bodie is more than just a ghost town. It is a living testament to the past, a place where history and the supernatural intertwine. Its story is one of hope and despair, wealth and ruin, life and death. And even though the town itself may be silent, the ghosts of Bodie continue to live on, telling their stories to those brave enough to listen. As visitors leave the town, they often take a piece of Bodie with them, whether it's the memory of an eerie whisper or the image of a figure standing in a window. Bodie may no longer be a town of the living, but it is far from forgotten. Its spirits, both human and otherwise, have ensured that Bodie's legacy will never truly fade away. California may be known for its beauty, but as we've seen tonight, it holds a much darker side. Ghostly ships, haunted mansions, abandoned prisons, and cursed towns all serve as chilling reminders that some spirits never move on. Are you brave enough to visit these haunted locations? Or will you let the ghosts remain undisturbed, forever trapped between our world and the next? If you enjoyed this terrifying journey, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more spine-chilling stories from Horror TV. And remember, sometimes the scariest places are closer than you think. Sleep tight, if you can.